Let's break this down. Human nature is wired to assign value to things that are rare, exclusive, or hard to obtain. It's not just a concept, it's psychology. We see it everywhere, from economics to relationships. Think about the last time you saw a limited edition item. The moment you realize something is exclusive, your desire for it skyrockets. Why? Because we are drawn to what is scarce. We don't want what's always available. We want what feels special, what feels like it could slip through our fingers if we don't act. Now apply this to relationships. When you are always available, when you're always texting first, always showing up, always proving your love, you are in essence eliminating the very thing that makes you valuable. There is no sense of urgency, no reason for the other person to pause and think, wow, I really don't want to lose this. It's human instinct to appreciate something more when we realize it's not guaranteed. Let's take an example. Imagine you go to a fancy restaurant and the waiter tells you they have an exclusive dish that's only available for a limited time. Even if you weren't planning to order it, suddenly you want it. The rarity of it triggers your desire. Now imagine they say, actually, we have this dish all the time. You can get it any time. Immediately, the excitement fades. The scarcity is gone. The value drops. The same thing happens in relationships. If you are always present, always giving, always showing up without hesitation, there is no reason for the other person to feel your absence. And if they don't feel your absence, they don't get the opportunity to truly appreciate your presence. The most powerful thing you can do in any relationship, whether romantic, professional, or personal, is to let people feel what it's like when you're not there. Because that's when they realize what you truly bring to the table. Now this is where most people get it wrong. They think scarcity means playing games, being manipulative, or withholding love on purpose. That's not what we're talking about here. This isn't about making someone feel insecure or guessing where they stand with you. This is about creating genuine value in your presence by making sure it isn't taken for granted. When you make yourself too accessible, you remove the natural tension that makes relationships exciting. You eliminate the mystery, the curiosity, the anticipation. Think about the early days of a relationship, the excitement, the butterflies, the wondering when they'll text, the feeling of missing someone. That energy exists because there's still space between you. But when you remove all space, when you are always available, you take away that very thing that made the connection so electrifying in the first place. Now, I want you to ask yourself, am I always the one initiating? Am I always available the moment they call? Do I respond instantly without hesitation? Do I prioritize them over myself every single time? If the answer is yes, you may have unknowingly made your presence so constant that its value has diminished. Let's take another example. Luxury brands. Why do people pay thousands of dollars for a bag, a watch, or a car when there are cheaper alternatives that do the exact same thing? It's because these brands understand perceived value. They create scarcity. They don't flood the market. They make their products exclusive, desirable, and rare. And as a result, people are willing to chase them, wait for them, and pay a premium just to have them. Now imagine if luxury brands started giving their products away for free to everyone all the time. Would they still have the same value? Of course not. Because what's always available, what's easy to get, what requires no effort, loses its worth. So how do you apply this in your relationships? You create value by having a life outside of the relationship. You invest in yourself. You pursue your passions. You spend time with people who uplift you. You focus on your own growth, your goals, and your happiness. You don't make someone else the center of your universe. You become the center of your own universe. And in doing so, you naturally create the kind of presence that people crave rather than take for granted. When you operate from a place of confidence and self-worth, you don't have to force anyone to miss you. They just will, because you are not desperate for their attention. You are not giving yourself away so freely that they never have a moment to wonder about you, to crave your presence, to miss your energy. Think about the people in your life whom you respect and admire the most. Are they the ones who are always at your beck and call? Or are they the ones who have boundaries, who have their own sense of purpose, who bring value to the table just by being who they are? Scarcity is not about playing hard to get. It's about being someone who is worth missing. Someone who is so fulfilled, so confident, so whole within themselves that when they choose to give their time and energy, it feels like a privilege, not an expectation. Because here's the truth. When someone knows they can have you anytime, anywhere with zero effort, the chase is gone. The appreciation fades. But when they realize that your presence is not guaranteed, that it's a gift, not a given, they start to value it in a way they never did before. Desire isn't born out of constant presence. It's not built when you're always around, always available, always responding. No, true desire grows in absence. It grows in space. It thrives in anticipation. Because the human mind is wired to want what it doesn't immediately have. Let's talk about chemistry. The most powerful moments in any relationship aren't just about physical connection. They're about the tension, the buildup, the waiting, the wondering. It's the heartbeat that speeds up when you see their name pop up on your phone. It's the moment right before the first kiss, when time slows down and all you can think about is what's coming next. That's what fuels attraction. But what happens when there's no space? When every text is answered immediately, when every request is met with a yes before it's even fully spoken, when you're always there, always available, always giving, you eliminate the space where desire grows. You take away the longing, the anticipation, the curiosity. You remove the very thing that makes connection exciting. Think about this. Have you ever craved a food that you couldn't have? Maybe it was a dish from a restaurant that was closed for the night, or a dessert that was sold out, or a meal you once had on vacation and never found again. That craving, that wanting, makes the experience more valuable. But what happens when you have access to that same food every single day? The excitement fades, the craving disappears. It becomes just another option, not something special. Now apply this to relationships. When you are always present, when there's never a moment of absence, when you never allow the other person to feel what life is like without you, you take away their ability to crave you, and craving is what fuels desire. Let's take an example from history. Some of the most passionate, legendary love stories were fueled not by constant presence, but by separation. Think of the great love letters, the poetry, the longing that came from distance. Why? Because space forces the heart to feel. It forces the mind to reflect. It forces someone to actually miss you. And missing is powerful. Missing creates appreciation. Missing makes someone realize just how much they value you. But here's where most people get it wrong. They fear space. They think that if they step back, if they stop being so available, they will lose the person they care about. So they do the opposite. They overgive, they over-explain, they try to force connection instead of letting it breathe. And in doing so, they actually push the other person away. Because nobody is drawn to something they feel suffocated by. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you squeeze it too tightly, it slips through your fingers. But if you hold it with an open palm, it stays. Love, attraction, desire, they work the same way. When you hold too tightly, when you grip out of fear, when you don't allow space, you actually create the very thing you're trying to avoid: disinterest, loss, disconnect. But when you step back, when you allow space, something incredible happens. The other person starts to think about you. They start to wonder what you're doing, where you are, who you're with. And that wondering, that's where desire is born. Now let's make this practical. How do you allow space without playing games? How do you fuel desire without being distant in a way that feels cold or detached? First, stop over-explaining yourself. You don't need to announce every move you make. You don't need to justify why you're busy, why you didn't reply right away, why you have other priorities. Just live your life. Let them notice that you are not always available. Let them feel the shift in energy when you focus on yourself instead of constantly checking in. Second, create moments of absence. If you always text good morning, let a day pass without it. If you're always the one initiating plans, stop and see what happens. If you're always adjusting your schedule to fit theirs, start prioritizing your own time. This isn't about punishment. It's about resetting the dynamic. It's about letting them step forward instead of you always being the one to chase. Third, build a life that excites you. Because here's the truth. The most attractive people aren't the ones waiting around for someone else's attention. They are the ones who are so fulfilled, so busy with their own passions, their own growth, their own joy, that their absence is felt when they're not around. They don't have to force anyone to miss them. It happens naturally. Think about someone you've admired from a distance. Maybe it was a person who seemed so full of life, so engaged in their own world that you couldn't help but be drawn to them. They weren't chasing anyone, they weren't desperate for attention, they simply existed in a way that was magnetic. And that's exactly what space allows you to create. Now, let's talk about human psychology for a second. Studies have shown that when people experience small doses of uncertainty, their attraction increases. When something isn't immediately accessible, the brain assigns it a higher value. This is why we are more excited about a response from someone who doesn't reply instantly than from someone who is always available. It's why a person who is unpredictable in a good way, who has their own life, their own mystery, their own sense of independence, is more attractive than someone who is always an open book. But the key here is balance. Too much space and you create distance. Too little space and you kill the spark. The sweet spot is just enough room for them to miss you, just enough space for their mind to wander, just enough absence for your presence to feel like a gift. Because at the end of the day, people don't appreciate what they think they will always have. They don't chase what's already standing still. They don't crave what is already in their hands. But when you step back, when you allow space, when you give them the opportunity to feel your absence, that's when the fire of desire starts to grow. There's a fundamental truth that most people miss when it comes to relationships. You teach people how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. If you don't value yourself, if you don't see your own worth, don't expect anyone else to. The energy you bring into a relationship, whether it's confidence or desperation, self-respect or insecurity, dictates how others perceive and respond to you. Now let's break this down. What does neediness actually look like? It's not just calling or texting too much. It's not just wanting to spend time with someone. No, neediness is deeper than that. Neediness is when your happiness depends on someone else's attention, validation, or approval. It's when you sacrifice your own needs, your own dreams, your own sense of self just to keep someone in your life. And the harsh truth, neediness is repelling, not because people are cruel, but because deep down we are all drawn to strength, independence, and confidence. Now think about the opposite of neediness, self-worth. When you know your value, you don't chase. You don't beg for love, for attention, for time. You don't mold yourself into whatever you think someone else wants. Instead, you stand firm in who you are, and that is powerful. That is attractive. Let's take a real-world example. Picture two people walking into a room. One person is nervous, constantly seeking reassurance, adjusting their posture, trying to read the room, hoping to be liked. The other walks in with confidence, not arrogance. They are comfortable in their own skin. They don't need approval, and because of that, they naturally draw people in. That's the difference between neediness and self-worth. When you need someone to validate you, you give away your power. But when you know your worth, people feel it. They sense it in your energy, in your actions, and your boundaries. Now let's apply this to relationships. When you place your self-worth in someone else's hands, you give them complete control over your emotion. If they text back, you feel good. If they don't, you feel anxious. If they give you attention, you feel valuable. If they pull away, you start questioning yourself. That is not self-worth. That is dependency. And dependency breeds insecurity. It creates a cycle where you are constantly seeking external validation instead of owning your value from within. So how do you shift from neediness to self-worth? One, stop overgiving. One of the biggest signs of low self-worth is overgiving. You give too much of your time, your energy, your love, often without receiving the same in return. You justify it by saying, if I just show them how much I care, they'll see my value. But that's not how it works. People don't appreciate what they don't have to work for. When you constantly overgive, you're not showing love, you're showing insecurity. You're saying, I have to prove my worth by giving more, doing more, being more. But here's the thing. When you value yourself, you don't feel the need to prove anything. You love freely, but you also expect to be loved in return. You give, but not at the cost of your own well-being. You don't chase, you attract. And the difference is everything. 2, set boundaries without fear. A person with self-worth sets boundaries, not because they're trying to push people away, but because they respect themselves enough to protect their energy. A person who lacks self-worth, on the other hand, is terrified of setting boundaries because they fear it will drive people away. So they say yes when they want to say no. They accept behaviors that make them uncomfortable. They tolerate inconsistency, disrespect, or neglect just to avoid conflict or rejection. But let me tell you something. The people who truly value you will never leave because of your boundaries. They will respect them. They will admire them, because boundaries are a sign of strength, of confidence, of self-respect. And the people who walk away when you enforce them, they were never meant to stay. 3, build a life that fulfills you. One of the quickest ways to shift out of neediness is to build a life that is so full, so exciting, so meaningful that you are not waiting for someone else to complete you. People with strong self-worth don't revolve their entire world around a relationship. They have passions, they have goals, they have friendships, hobbies, dreams. They are whole on their own. Now here's the irony. The moment you start truly focusing on yourself, the moment you stop depending on someone else for your happiness, that's when people start chasing you. Because confidence is magnetic. Passion is attractive. Independence is irresistible. Think about it. Who are you more drawn to? The person who is constantly seeking your attention, always available, making you the center of their world? Or the person who is secure, who has their own ambitions, who doesn't need you but chooses you? It's always the second person, every time. 4. Stop making excuses for people's behavior. When you lack self-worth, you tolerate things you shouldn't. You make excuses for why someone isn't treating you right. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I need to be more patient. But when you have strong self-worth, you don't settle for maybe. You don't settle for half-hearted love. You don't tolerate being an afterthought because you know what you bring to the table. And this is the key. When you respect yourself, you naturally command respect from others. You no longer feel desperate for someone to pick you because deep down you already know you are the prize. Now here's the challenge. Start acting like it, walk like it, speak like it, show up like it. Stop looking for someone else to validate you and start validating yourself. Because the moment you do, the game changes. The energy shifts. You stop begging for love and start attracting it. Not out of desperation, but out of pure, undeniable self-worth. Emotional independence is the ability to regulate your own emotions, to find fulfillment within yourself rather than depending on someone else for your happiness. It's the difference between feeling whole on your own versus needing someone to complete you. And here's the truth. When you master emotional independence, you become unstoppable. You become a force that others are drawn to, not because you need them, but because you exude strength, confidence, and self-sufficiency. Now, let's break this down. Why is emotional independence so powerful? Because when you don't rely on external validation to feel good about yourself, you take back control over your life. You are no longer at the mercy of someone else's actions, moods, or approval. You become unshakable. You become someone who chooses to be in a relationship rather than someone who needs to be in one. And that choice, that's what makes the difference between love that is free-flowing and love that is suffocating. Think about it. Have you ever seen someone who loses themselves completely in a relationship? They go from being independent, vibrant, and full of life to making their entire world about one person. Their happiness rises and falls based on how much attention they receive. Their confidence depends on how much reassurance they get. Their entire sense of self is wrapped up in another person's opinion of them. That's not love. That's emotional dependence. And emotional dependence is dangerous. Why? Because when your emotions are tied to someone else, you give away your power. If they pull away, you spiral. If they don't text back, you overthink. If they aren't as invested as you are, you start questioning your worth. You become reactive instead of grounded, insecure instead of confident, anxious instead of at peace. And that kind of energy pushes people away. Now, compare that to someone who is emotionally independent. They love deeply, but their world doesn't fall apart if someone leaves. They value connection, but they don't cling. They appreciate attention, but they don't rely on it to feel good about themselves. They can be in a relationship without losing themselves in it. And because of that, they command respect, admiration, and attraction effortlessly. So how do you cultivate emotional independence? How do you shift from needing love to simply enjoying it from a place of strength? 1, detach your worth from external validation. The first step in emotional independence is recognizing that your worth does not come from how much attention or validation you receive. It doesn't come from whether someone chooses you or not. It comes from within. You were worthy before they entered your life. You will be worthy after they leave. Think about this. If you need someone else's approval to feel good about yourself, what happens when that approval is taken away? You crumble. You question yourself. You chase. But when you know who you are, when you are solid in your own self-worth, you don't seek validation. You already have it. Start affirming your worth without waiting for someone else to do it for you. Instead of looking for love to make you feel valued, start acting like someone who already knows they are valuable. Because the moment you do, you shift the dynamic. You stop being someone who is desperate for attention and start being someone who attracts attention effortlessly. 2, build inner fulfillment. People who are emotionally dependent often expect their partner to fill the gaps in their happiness. They think, once I have love, I'll feel complete. But love is not a replacement for inner fulfillment. It's not a cure for insecurity, boredom, or emptiness. If you are unhappy before a relationship, you will still be unhappy in one, because no one else can fill the void within you. So instead of searching for someone to make you happy, become the source of your own happiness. Find joy in your own company. Pursue passions that light you up. Build a life so fulfilling that a relationship becomes an addition, not a necessity. When you do this, love stops being something you need to survive and starts being something you choose to enhance your already beautiful life. 3, master emotional self-regulation. Emotionally independent people don't let their emotions control them. They don't panic when someone pulls away. They don't overreact when things don't go their way. Instead, they step back, observe, and respond from a place of strength, not desperation. If you find yourself feeling anxious or reactive in relationships, start practicing emotional self-regulation. When you feel triggered, instead of acting on impulse, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I reacting from a place of insecurity or from a place of self-respect? Instead of texting out of fear, instead of chasing when you feel neglected, sit with your emotions and process them on your own. This is what emotionally independent people do. They don't let momentary feelings dictate their actions. They don't seek external reassurance for every insecurity. They learn to sit with discomfort, to work through their emotions without needing someone else to fix them. And in doing so, they become emotionally resilient. 4, hold your own standards. A person who is emotionally dependent will tolerate mistreatment just to keep a relationship intact. They will lower their standards out of fear of losing someone. They will make excuses, overlook red flags, and accept less than they deserve, all because they are afraid of being alone. But a person who is emotionally independent, they hold their standards no matter what. They don't settle for inconsistency. They don't beg for attention. They don't compromise on their values just to please someone else. Here's the truth. When you hold your standards, you might lose people who aren't willing to meet them, but those aren't the people you want anyway. The ones who respect your standards, the ones who step up instead of walking away, those are the ones worth keeping. 5, I would be okay with walking away. One of the most powerful things you can ever do in a relationship is this. Be willing to walk away if you are not being valued, not in a manipulative way, not as a threat, but as a quiet, unshakable truth. You will not stay in places where you are not respected, loved, and appreciated. People who lack emotional independence stay in situations long past their expiration date. They hold on even when they're being taken for granted. But people who are emotionally independent, they know that walking away isn't a loss, it's a gain. Because every time you choose yourself over someone who doesn't see your worth, you reinforce your own value. And paradoxically, when you have the strength to walk away, people start to respect you more. They realize you are not someone who can be strung along, manipulated, or taken for granted. They see that your love is not something to be played with, it's something that must be earned. At the core of emotional independence is this: you are the source of your own happiness. You do not need anyone to complete you, validate you, or make you feel whole. Because the moment you truly understand this, you become untouchable. You stop chasing, you stop clinging, you stop fearing loss. And in that space, real love, love that is strong, secure, and deeply fulfilling, finally has the room to grow.